Cotton, we need to cross the sea to a new location.
What? What do you mean?
There is a threat looming in the distance, and we must travel.
Well, how will we get there?
A fleet of ships, obviously.
Oh, well, I guess that makes sense.
I have one job for you, Cotton. Pick the flagship.
What?
Pick your favorite flagship.
Is this some kind of coded message?
Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages, as time passes
and new Monster Hunter games and expansions release, opinions change. Every Monster Hunter game has one monster at the head of the charge, one monster filling up the all-important role of being in the box art for the physical release of the game, the flagship. I have ranked the flagship monsters before based on my opinion, but that was just after the release of Rise, and nearly a year of hunting ago. Crazy how time flies, but of course, in that time not only did more Rise DLC happen, but we also played through Monster Hunter Freedom Unite and Monster Hunter Frontier and also Monster Hunter Stories 2, and I've just had a lot more time to think about Monster Hunter Rise since its release as well. And so those have affected my opinions on the list of monsters in the series as a whole, and also these specific creatures as a result. As for Frontier, if I included every flagship monster they had, it would make the list almost twice as big, so rather than including every single one, I will be including the main flagship of the game, Espinas. As well, for obvious reasons, the flagship of Sunbreak, Malzino, won't be on the list because, well, I haven't fought him, and personally as I'm trying to avoid as much new information as possible, I haven't seen anything revealed past the literal initial teaser for Sunbreak, so while I can guess that he will be at minimum an A-tier monster based solely on the visuals of his model, I won't be pinning him to the proper list this time around. That'll have to wait for the future. And so without further ado, let's dig into my flagship monster tier list for 2022. Starting off in the D tier, this one might as well just be renamed because it has only one creature, and that is Azure Rathalos. Sorry, not sorry. I don't like Azure Rathalos. Regular Rathalos is pretty neat, but Azure Rathalos is just Rathalos but blue with a moveset that I find genuinely annoying to be against. He stays in the air even longer, he fires off hundreds of fireballs over a hunt, and I just want to fight something that will stay on the ground while I smack it in the face. Moving up a whole tier to C then, we have, well, regular Rathalos. While I understand the importance of this monster and the fact that it was the very first flagship means that without this monster, the series as a whole would be unbelievably different than it currently is. I am judging them on their merits as monsters, and I am comparing them all between each other. While I can absolutely see someone in 2004 seeing this monster on a cover of a game and thinking, hell yeah, I'm gonna play that, it just doesn't really compare to me to seeing something as unique and crazy as Valstrax, for example. This monster is not bad by any means, but I definitely wouldn't be particularly unhappy if we went a generation of Monster Hunter without having 6 monster slots filled by default for Rathalos, Rathian, Azure Rathalos, Pink Rathian, Silver Rathalos, and Gold Rathian. And that was the only one in tier C. I'm feeling quite positive today, so this list is a bit top-loaded. Deal with it. In tier D, let's start with Narga Kuga. I know a lot of people absolutely adore this monster, even being a very popular favorite monster in the series. But to me, it's just sort of a big cat, and I get how that appeals to people. People like cats. And I know it has other inspirations, like an eagle and a rattlesnake, but none of that really comes through as much as just cat to me. His moveset is just sort of jumping around. It's cool, but it doesn't make me think differently. It doesn't challenge me particularly. It's fun, but not mind-blowing, which sounds exactly like a B tier to me. After him, we have Tigrex, who I do personally hold a bit higher than Narga Kuga, but not enough to bump him up to the next tier up. I just really like the T-Rex, but it has 4 legs and charges as its main attack concept. The coloring is beautiful, and the only thing really holding him back is the fact that his moveset is pretty much 90% charging back and forth. Yes, it fits thematically, but once you have fought a Tigrex, you have fought most of the Tigrexes. There isn't a massive amount of nuance to him until you get to the proper subspecies and rare species. Him and Narga Kuga I sort of see as matching opposites. Tigrex I love the concept of, and the fight sort of whereas Narga Kuga I don't really like the concept as much as most people, but the fight's pretty cool, but not mind-blowing as I said. Moving on then to the A tier today, first up the newest flagship of the bunch, Magnamalo. My feelings on this monster have gone back and forth and back again over time, and honestly, I could see myself bumping this up to S tier come Sunbreak if his Master Rank version gets the right kind of upgrades. Visually, I do love his aesthetic, even if it is a little bit overdone in my opinion. He does look a little bit more samurai than monster, but that is a very personal opinion of mine and a very careful line to walk when designing monsters inspired heavily by real-life things and also mythological creatures, the way that Rise has done. The fight, though, is absolutely incredible. I love it the whole way through, the whole Hellfire mechanic not only being usable by him, but but also when you have it on you, you can use it against monsters, and I adore that. What the visuals may not add up to for me, the fight more than makes up for, so it is entirely possible with the fight getting a new upgrade in around a month that the fight will become even better and boost him even further up. After him comes Kushala Deyara, who has gone up a considerable amount in my favor since his addition to Monster Hunter Rise. I have always loved his aesthetic and his theme, a dragon essentially made out of metal. He's just really cool, but before his Rise version, I just did not enjoy fighting Kushala. At no point would I sit down for a hunting session and say, you know, I would very much enjoy fighting a Kushala Deyara today, but I have done that in Rise, and to me that says quite a lot.
You're saying you just spontaneously got better?
The new fight has done wonders for him, and combined with his general concept, that puts him as a solid A-tier monster for me in this context. Then we have Soregios. My thoughts on him have sometimes been cause for contention, as he is known as a pinecone, and well, I only saw and fought him after meeting Basilgeuse in Monster Hunter World, who to me is the pinecone monster. So for a long time I had it in my head that I could only really like one of these two monsters, but that's sort of just silly, really. They can both be pinecones and both be great, and I think that this is a good example of my mindset shifting over the last year or so. I haven't even fought a Soregios for a long time before this, well, outside of Monster Hunter Stories 2 at least, and I spend a lot of time thinking about Monster Hunter. Even when I'm not playing the games, I spend hours every day thinking about it. It's just how I am. And when you take the general design of this monster, which is really cool, including the parrot feet that he's got, and I love that style of foot for a monster, the blade-like scales that cause bleed, and just the agile flying around the place, I quite like him as a unique monster who deals physical damage, as usually the most unique creatures in the series are all elementally based or status based, and while he does deal bleed, which is a status, it's still fully physical as a monster. After that then comes Velkana. I've talked extensively about this monster in the past, and unlike the last entry, thinking about it more hasn't really changed my opinion.
Nothing can change my feelings for her.
I adore the monster. I think the fight has a number of cool mechanics, but the fact that this creature puts up walls and then can fire a beam that then goes through the walls is just really weird to me. As a base concept, that's okay, but then make it break the wall too. It just doesn't make logical sense that the beam goes from one side of the wall to the other side of the wall without dispersing if it doesn't also make a giant hole in the wall. It doesn't make the fight mechanically bad or even mechanically worse, but it does make my weird little brain very upset every time in ways that I can't really explain. It just breaks my immersion completely, you know, for a game about rolling around with giant weapons swinging at made-up creatures. Then we have the round mama herself, Gameth. I really hope that we do get to see her again someday soon, and I have to imagine she isn't that far away from it, given that we have already seen the return of Glavinus and Misitsune in recent Monster Hunter outings. It would be weird not to complete the set of the Fated Four, brought into the new style of hunting that we have in the 5th generation and onwards. I absolutely adore the design of this creature. I think she is breathtaking, and the first time that you go stand next to her on a hunt, you can really feel how imposing she is. But the fight itself is just sort of really slow. Of course, it fits the monster that she is and the size that she is, but generally in Monster Hunter, the slower a fight is, the easier it gets, because big damage slow hits are just easier to dodge than quick little damage hits. As a result, I just don't find the fight challenging or particularly interesting. It gets better with her Deviant, but this isn't a tier list of the variations of all the flagship monsters, just the flagship monsters themselves. Rounding off the A tier then comes the one promised frontier monster, Espinas. Aesthetically, the way that this creature looks like a rose just really speaks to me, and I love that when you first find it, it is sleeping and you have to actively fight it to make it even bother to wake up and hit you back, which helps give this creature an air of intimidation even just from the get-go. The fight is fun, if not absolutely mind-blowing, but the aesthetics and concepts behind this creature are 100% the reason that I've placed it where I have. Moving on to the S tier then, right at the top we have Narga Gante. I've been very vocal of my love for this creature. His aesthetic is great. Not ridiculously cool, but more than cool enough to match his stature, his placement in the story, and his general moveset. But that moveset and the fight surrounding it is why I love this creature as much as I do. He was one of the first monsters that I hunted the ever-living crap out of on repeat because I just found it super enjoyable. The first time that you fight him, it is quite tough, but as you learn about his spike break mechanics and work out how to lock him down, he becomes one of the most satisfyingly simple fights in the series. Yes, yes, he is easy once you know how to fight him, but in my opinion, that is sort of what a monster should be. Difficult the first time that you see them, easy once you have killed 50 of them, learned how they function, and how to get their weaknesses. If a monster is genuinely learnable, that is super fun to me. That is prime monster design to me. After that comes Brackie Dios, a fantastic creature all around. His design is a little bit bulky for my personal preferences, but I love brute wyverns, so I can accept that anyways. And then slime as a concept is just perfect. He literally added a whole new status to the series as a result of his base existence, and it is one of the most fun statuses as well. His fight is great and only got better, of course, when he was added to Iceborne. He is just incredible both as a monster and as a flagship. Then we have Glavinus. The Swordtail brute wyvern is fantastic. He does look a little bit more demon than monster to me, being a little bit too evil looking and less sort of natural looking, but the second that the Swordtail lights up, I sort of forget my gripes because sometimes the cool factor just outweighs the need for realism, alright? And this guy is absolutely dripping in cool factor. The fight itself is extremely awesome. Not insane as far as new mechanics or anything like that, but a monster that is essentially sword fighting against you makes you think about the battlefield quite a bit differently than you normally do, which is something I very much enjoy. After him comes Valstrax, who is the favorite monster of many people and for quite good reasons. Aesthetically, he is absolutely mystical as a creature, and unlike some of the other ones I have had gripes about aesthetically, he is, well, an elder dragon. And if there is one thing in this series that gives a creature full license to get as batshit crazy as they want it to be, it is the label of elder dragon. His fight is simply extremely enjoyable as well. He has a ton of mix-ups and memorable moments, and I generally just really like any fight where a monster uses its unusually shaped body in ways that make you think about the space around you in new and interesting ways. After that comes Gore Magala. With myself not playing the main 4th generation games, I have only experienced him in Generations Ultimate, and I guess also in Frontier. And I do feel like a lot of people have a particular appreciation for him that involves the context of the MH4 and 4U story that I simply have not experienced myself. However, even without that, I can clearly see why this monster is amazing. Aesthetically, he is definitely dark and edgy, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing, it sort of depends how you lean into it. And he leans into it completely, which is the way to do it in my opinion. The way that he flicks on when he enrages is really cool, and the fight as a whole is extremely fun, not only having a slightly odd-shaped monster, but also a whole new mechanic in the Frenzy virus. It is arguable that Gore is one of the most overall impactful monsters ever to be put in a Monster Hunter game, as the whole game was unmistakably altered by him and his powers, which is more than I can say for pretty much any other flagship on this list. Following him is Legiacris, the electric crocodile. My opinions about him have actually gone up a fair bit over time. After seeing him properly underwater in the 3rd generation and fighting against him there, I realized just how incredible this creature can be, and I honestly think he may be my favorite underwater fight as well now that I've had the pleasure of doing it. But I really love the way that he transferred near effortlessly from the sea up to the land to a almost completely different fight like it was nothing. The only unfortunate thing with this creature is that, well, the underwater combat was only a part of 3rd generation. It didn't stick around, and while I have high hopes that Capcom will revisit the concept of underwater combat in a future Monster Hunter game, we have no reason to believe that that will be the case as of right now. And so right now, Legiacris is landlocked and has a much less interesting fight as a result. That said, 3rd generation Monster Hunter games do still exist. You can still just go play them, and you can fight him in his original state, and that version of him is exactly why I consider him an S-tier flagship monster. Moving on then to Zenogra, the giant thunder puppy. This one is special because for a number of years he was literally the only fanged wyvern in the entire series, creating his own category of monster and then owning it by himself for essentially 2 generations of Monster Hunter games. And then once they started adding way more fanged wyverns in Monster Hunter World, they then brought him back in Iceborne and he reminded everyone why he was the big daddy of it all. I know Josh doesn't really like his aesthetic all that much, but I'm a pretty big fan of it myself. I don't mind the coloring and I love the way that you can actively see his little back hives for the Fulgur bugs. The fight is great and I never have a dull moment against him, the way that he spins and flips around like crazy. It's just so much fun. Then comes Bloodbath Diablos, who isn't technically a flagship per se, but basically is. And god, I love this creature. Aesthetically, this is the best Diablos by a mile, and I actually have a sort of soft spot for regular Diablos too, so this just increases here. Fight-wise, this thing is just incredible. Known for being an incredibly difficult monster, but the difficulty is done in a way that I consider to be fun, rather than a sort of forced difficulty. Yes, his damage is high, but the challenge comes less from the damage itself than it does from his moveset, and the fact that he just just gets faster and stronger the lower that his health is, making it almost feel like a multi-phased boss fight within the freedom of the Monster Hunter combat system, and I love that. Second last then is Misitsune, an absolutely gorgeous creature like a fox mixed with a paintbrush, big old squishy purple tail. I feel like you could cuddle up with this thing and sleep forever, and well, if you tried to cuddle up with it, it might actually make you sleep forever by killing you, because it's sort of vicious. The fight itself is just awesome though. When I first got to this creature, I thought the bubbles as a concept were way too unrealistic, but I don't care anymore. I think that realism balanced with fun is the right way to do it in Monster Hunter, because if you're having enough of a good time, you might even be able to believe that this guy is purple, you know what I mean? And finally today in the S tier comes Astulos. Dun 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 dun. Yeah, okay, sorry, but like this monster's incredible, right? A dragonfly-based dragon, which is just as a phrase by itself is very fun to say, but to have such incredibly dark scales paired with these beautiful neon green wings and the accents all over the body, and then as he fires up with electricity, he just gets brighter and brighter. I also am a reasonably big fan of the color green, so I'll admit that plays a bit of a part here, but I think he's just totally gorgeous. As you could tell by my rendition at the beginning of the entry, I also think that his monster theme might well be the best in the series. Well, it's definitely in my top 5 for certain. And then the fight itself is of course just really fun. He moves in interesting ways, he uses thunder in fun ways, and he's just incredibly fast, which makes it somewhat of a challenge in itself. And that just about does it, everyone. My new and improved, updated tier list of all the Monster Hunter flagship monsters as of May 30th, 2022. Do you agree with how I've laid this all out? Do you think that all of my S tiers deserve to be S tiers, or was I just in a particularly good mood when I made the list? Like if you like the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.